When I was a sophomore in college, I lived in an apartment in New York City on Roosevelt Island, which is nestled between Manhattan and Queens. The island has a dark history, and at one point there were insane asylums and a smallpox hospital. But with all of that suffering, the island seems to still carry that burden. So our apartment was laid out in sort of an L shape. The living room and dining room faced part of the hallway. There was a bathroom at the end of the hall that was small and led to the two bedrooms, one of which had a balcony off of it. I'm not going to lie, we had a killer view, and for a dorm we felt like we were living pretty large. But not long after we moved in, my three roommates and I all began to experience some things. It started with the feeling like we were being watched all the time. I remember specifically I was home alone and working on a mural, and I began to feel very uneasy, like someone was right behind me the whole time watching me. This went on for about an hour, and I just couldn't shake this feeling, but did my best to just roll with it. But I'll admit it, I was scared. I was relieved when my roommates got home. As the semester continued, my roommate and I had a huge project due, and in order to accommodate all the space we needed to do it, we took turns working in the living room. I worked on my project first and then headed to bed as my roommate worked on hers. I was laying in bed reading with my back to the door when I saw a shadow come up on my book and felt like someone was behind me. Thinking it was my roommate, I turned to see what she wanted, and she wasn't there. I shrugged it off and kept reading. The shadow once again crept up on my book. I moved my blankets, my head, and the shadow didn't move. At this point, I was scared, but it felt ridiculous if I mentioned it, so I pulled the covers over my head and just went to sleep. Fast forward to Halloween. We had a party and a bunch of friends were over. As the night wore on, we started talking about ghosts and spooky stuff. And lo and behold, it comes up about how everyone thinks our place is a little spooky. My roommate starts to tell a story about how one night we both had a project due and we took turns. I'm like, where is she going with this? She says she was working on her project and she saw someone out of the corner of her eye walking in the hallway. So she gets up thinking it's me, and it turns out I'm asleep. She goes back to do her project and she feels someone come up on her. All the hairs on the back of her neck stand up, and once again, no one is there. Now at this point, I had never mentioned to her what happened to me. That same night, I told her my story and we both were in shock. The more we talk, a few people mentioned feeling like they were going to get pushed off the balcony every single time they went out there. And then it comes out that two of our friends had the exact same dream when they slept over. They were paralyzed and began floating and then began to uncontrollably spin. At this point, I'm convinced something is happening. Sometime later, I began to start seeing a shadow figure, often out of the corner of my eye in the hallway. It was dark with no features, and I only saw it out of the corner of my eye as it quickly darted when I would look full on. I convinced myself it was just my eyes until my friend was over. We were sitting at the table talking when I got distracted for a second because I saw it. So I took a pause in the conversation, and when I looked at my friend, she said, "I saw it." I said, "Saw what?" And she replied, "That black thing in the hallway." I had never told her I saw it before, so I felt totally vindicated. The pinnacle of my experiences happened when it was winter break. My roommates had left to go home, and I was the last one there. Not wanting to be alone, I called a friend to stay. We were talking about going out, so I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth. The door was open because we were still talking. When there was a pause in our conversation, I heard a voice plain as day whisper my name loudly and directly into my ear. At this point, I visibly freaked out. I confirmed with my friend that she said nothing, and we decided to leave the apartment for a while. During winter break, I had contacted a few paranormal teams who wanted to check it out after I relayed my story. When we got back from break, I told my roommates and they were not at all interested and acted like I was nuts, though we all had experiences. I regret to this day not just letting them come. So I went to a church, got holy water, sprinkled my apartment and said aloud, "This is my apartment and you're scaring me. That's not okay and you need to go." After that, I didn't feel much of a presence, but maybe I just believed what I did worked and learned to ignore it. I'll never know. Okay, I have been living in a lot of different houses. We've moved around a lot, especially me and my mother after her divorce. Needless to say, I have seen ghosts before, particularly one, so I'm not entirely spooked by the idea. Maybe I get a tad paranoid, but there was one time that completely led me to believe in ghosts. I will tell that brief story before getting to the true spooky story. Now, before my family divorced at a much younger age, I saw my, I believed, great uncle. I'm not sure the entire relation, just that he had recently passed and we were at the time renting his house or whatever. I never met him, at least not that I myself can recall, but I did see him. I was probably around 10 or something, and it wasn't just some shade or mist. No, it was a complete full body apparition. I moved past the living room and saw him. He was stood and simply sat down on the couch, just like any day. I remember his clothing mostly, brown boots, kind of dirty blue baggy jeans, and I believe possibly a faded red or blue shirt. I told my mother, who naturally assured me it was just my great uncle. How she knew it was him exactly, I don't know, but I know that even though I was startled, and I mean I ran to my mother solely based on the sudden appearance, I remember he didn't have that terrifying aura. You know that vibe you feel when unsettled by something. I suppose that's why I've always been open to the supernatural world. Which brings me to the more startling story. Like anyone, I do get startled and even a little paranoid with the supernatural. I'll often do my best to reason it with something more realistic. That's why I do have a problem trying to debunk this story myself, apart from my eyes playing tricks. So, away from that, we had just moved houses, me, my mother, and her jerk of a boyfriend. A two-story house sort of thing. Downstairs was just the garage and the other part was the owner guy's sleeping area. I don't know. All I know, it creeped me out. He also had a back shed we couldn't go in, which we did, and there were only cars in there, I hope. Needless to say, the house was unsettling. I didn't like the vibes. I also didn't like sleeping with a darn full body mirror closet door just across from me. Anyway, I was seated on one of the couches. It faced leading down the hallway. At the very end of the hallway was my closed door to my bedroom. To the left of that, my stepsister's room. To the right, an open room which led to the back door. That room didn't have a door that led to the hallway to the room, and before that room was the bathroom. I sat in the living room, which, by the way, for someone who gets paranoid easily, was not a great sitting position. Literally, my mother's room was to the right, and you had to go through a glass sliding door, then turn to go to the room. My anxiety and paranoid was always peaked. As I always was, looking through my laptop, probably on Facebook or playing a video game. I can't remember. I do remember seeing something in my peripheral vision, and I did manage to look it up in time to see whatever it was. It was like a mist, a grey smoke mist thing in the shape of a human or something. It wasn't solid. I know that. And it had dark smoky misty circles where the eyes were, kind of like a ghost of an alien. That's like the best way for me to describe it. It disappeared quickly from view, but I do remember seeing it a few more times. All I remember was hating that place. The owner collected number plates, cars. We couldn't venture into the back shed. We weren't entirely allowed in the little downstairs area which anyone could live in. It had a bathroom and places for like a fridge, an oven and all that, and I couldn't open one half of my closet. That closet really creeped me out. This just happened to me about 5 minutes ago. I recently built a small cabin in the back of our house with my dad, which I'm now living in, but I had to go back into the main house to grab something I'd forgotten earlier. So I'm on my way out of the back door, locking it and walking back to the cabin, when I hear a loud scuffling and scraping sound coming from the front of the house. It sounded as if someone or something was messing around near the bins or in them. What seemed like hours went by of me stood dead still, trying not to make the slightest sound with my keys in between my fingers. I was crouched behind a tool shed like this, in the darkness, for what felt like forever. After waiting for God knows how long there, I heard the noises again, this time louder and more pronounced. The scraping of feet on the floor and the sound of the bins being rattled. Then, nothing. I sat once again, completely still in the darkness, just anxiously waiting for whatever it was to jump out at me and attack me. But there was nothing, not a sound as I perched behind this wall in fear, wondering what it could be, moving around there at 3 a.m. with no light from the streets or surrounding houses. Now this may not seem strange to anyone else, but this noise didn't sound like an animal. And it's not like we have raccoons or bears in the UK, just rummaging through our bins. Either way, it's safe to say that I'm going to be set up all night out of fear, on lookout for whatever it was from my cabin. About 10 years ago, my boyfriend, we'll call him Dick, at the time had gotten a house. He was barely moved in, but I stayed the night one night. We had gotten into an argument, so I slept on the couch. I was laying there, and all of a sudden, it sounded like every single cupboard in the kitchen slammed. The kitchen was on the other side of the wall of the couch I was sleeping on, so it was very loud. Dick, who slept upstairs, said he didn't hear it. I ended up moving in. I always had this creepy feeling from a little crawl space door that was in our closet. It would just be open sometimes, even though We would make sure it was latched, and we never actually went in because it was just a bunch of loose insulation and it was hot as fuck in there. Anyway, two other incidents really stuck in my mind. Once, I was looking everywhere for my perfume. I always kept all my perfume and deodorant on top of our dresser, so it should have been there, and the specific one I wanted to wear that day was just gone. I looked in the bathroom just in case I had forgotten I used it, but it was nowhere to be found. This was during warmer months because I always just wore flip-flops. Well, a couple of weeks later, I needed a pair of socks, so I opened my sock drawer. It was a smaller drawer and it was also the top drawer. My missing perfume was in the middle of the drawer in just an empty circle, and the socks were surrounding it. I asked Dick and he said he didn't do it, which I believed because he was never really a prankster, so my mind was just blown. Now comes the most terrifying incident. Dick worked on semi-trucks and would have to go out in the middle of the night sometimes on a call for someone being broken down. I couldn't tell you what time it was, but he got a call and he was pissed because we were both sleeping, so he got up and left. I just laid there, trying to go back to sleep. I'd say about 20 minutes passed, and all of a sudden, I heard a man's voice yelling from the bottom of the stairs. It was not his voice, so I immediately froze up. I will always remember what he said too. He said, "Woman, what the fuck are you doing?" I closed my eyes and was scared shitless. I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. We only had one set of stairs, and if someone was in the house, I was fucked, unless I jumped out a 2-story window. So I just laid there, hoping I was hearing things or dreaming since I was half asleep. About a minute had passed, and suddenly I felt a rush of air in my face, almost like a high-powered fan hit me in the face. It was quick, and the voice was right in front of me, and it said, "Are you scared now, bitch?" And it gave an evil little laugh. I have had multiple paranormal occurrences throughout my life at various locations, but this was by far the scariest thing I ever experienced.